The ruins of Korthion Prime stretched across the horizon, silent monoliths of a civilization so old that even the stars above had forgotten their names. Stone-black towers jutted from the earth like shattered teeth, their surfaces slick with a thin layer of frost despite the planet's burning core. Winds howled through ancient corridors, carrying whispers of something long buried, something the galaxy had sworn never to awaken again. Dr. Elias Voss had spent years chasing the shadows of history, unearthing fragments of the past that others feared to touch. He had crossed the dead systems, walked among the husks of dying stars, and brushed his fingertips against the edges of knowledge that the galactic elite hoarded for themselves. And yet, nothing had ever stirred his soul like the call of Korthion Prime, the death engine, a name spoken only in cautionary whispers buried under layers of treaties and prohibitions. It had been a weapon, or so the stories claimed, an instrument so devastating that the ruling powers of the galaxy had deemed it an abomination. Entire fleets had perished in the war to contain it, and when the dust had settled, they had sworn it would never be touched again. They had locked it away beneath the bones of this forsaken world, veiling its existence beneath lies and the promise of annihilation for any who dared seek it out. But Elias had found something. A fragment of a lost archive buried deep within the wreckage of an old war cruiser adrift in the void. The coordinates had been scrambled, erased from history, yet the remnants of a transmission had led him here, to the edge of the forbidden. Single step into the ruins and the weight of countless dead civilizations pressed against him. His breath was slow, measured. The team behind him, hand-picked researchers, hardened explorers, and one ex-military operative whose presence had been arranged by forces above Elias's reach, moved in cautious silence. No one spoke of the Zha'ari, but their presence was an unspoken certainty. The ancient alien coalition had led the charge to seal away the death engine. They would not let it be uncovered. Not again. The air hummed with an unnatural resonance, pulsing beneath their feet like the heartbeat of a slumbering god. The deeper they ventured, the more the ruins seemed to shift around them, as though the structure itself were resisting their intrusion. Machines long dormant flickered to life at their presence, holograms casting ghostly blueprints against the walls, terminals pulsing with fractured data streams. A language older than human memory scrawled itself across the displays, shifting, adapting, recognizing them. Elias's fingers hovered over a console older than Earth itself. It was warm, alive. The patterns of alien script coalesced into something legible, something deliberate. It spoke not in words but in warnings. Do not wake it. His pulse quickened. His colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. The soldier at his side, Lieutenant Cass, tightened his grip on his weapon. They all felt it. The weight of something watching, something waiting. A flicker of movement in the distance. Then another. The air cracked as the first pulse rifle discharged. Shadows twisted. A low, droning hum filled the air, resonating through the walls and into their very bones. The Zha'ari had come, but it was already too late. A single tremor ran through the ground, followed by a sound so deep and resonant, it felt like the universe itself had drawn breath. The death engine had heard them. The tremor spread like a ripple through reality itself. Dust cascaded from the high vaults of the ruins, ancient structures groaning under the weight of a disturbance they had not endured for millennia. The hum deepened, vibrating through bone and blood, a resonance that bypassed mere sound and burrowed into the mind like a whisper from something incomprehensibly vast. Elias staggered, gripping the edge of the console, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Around him, his team stood frozen, eyes darting between one another as if to confirm the nightmare was shared. Cass had his rifle raised, shifting his stance into a defensive posture, but no amount of military training could prepare anyone for this. The Zha'ari emerged from the darkness like wraiths, their lithe forms gliding over the debris-strewn ground with an unnatural grace. Their exoskeletal armor shimmered under the dim light of the ruins, iridescent and flowing like liquid metal. They carried no weapons that Elias could see, but he knew better. Their kind had no need for crude implements of war. The leader among Them stepped forward, tall even by Zha'ari standards, his elongated features a sculpted mask of restrained fury. High Seer Varix. Elias had read his name in intelligence reports, always accompanied by dire warnings. Negotiations with him rarely ended in anything but submission or destruction. You should not have come here. Varix's voice cut through the air, though his mouth had not moved. The words resonated in Elias's mind, carried through the psionic web that the Zha'ari wielded as naturally as breathing. You do not understand what you have touched. Elias straightened, forcing himself to meet the alien's gaze. I'm not here to activate it. A lie. A weak one. He had told himself the same thing countless times, but standing here, at the precipice of history's darkest secret, he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. A shuddering pulse coursed through the ruins. The ground heaved, forcing the humans to steady themselves. The death engine was waking. The alien seer's expression did not change, but his mind flared against Elias's own, a silent storm of fury and fear. This is no weapon, Varix projected, his thoughts burning with the force of something ancient and absolute. It is a wound in the fabric of existence, a wound that cannot be reopened. And yet, it already had been. A deep, guttural roar reverberated through the ruins, the soundless scream of something awakening from a slumber it had never intended to end. The console before Elias flashed violently, glyphs shifting and collapsing into unreadable static before settling into something else. It has been too long. Not a warning. A statement. A presence. Cass's rifle snapped upward as shadows twisted, in the periphery. The ruins trembled again, dust cascading in torrents from unseen alcoves. Elias felt it too. A pressure, a weight in the air that defied physics, pressing inward on his very thoughts. We need to shut it down, Elias muttered, stepping back. Now. Varix moved fast, faster than any human could have. His hand shot forward, palm hovering just above the console. The moment his alien flesh touched the interface, everything changed. A scream, inhuman, fractured across time, split the air. The walls cracked, fissures spreading in rapid, unnatural angles, as reality seemed to reject what was happening. Elias was thrown to the ground, pain shooting through his ribs as the entire ruin seemed to fold in on itself. The death engine spoke. The cycle must end. And suddenly, the void answered. The moment the death engine's voice rippled through existence, reality twisted. Time no longer moved in a straight line. It coiled, folding in on itself like a wounded animal, snapping back with unpredictable force. The ruins of Korthion Prime shuddered, as if the world itself were coming apart. Elias felt unmoored, as if he existed in multiple places at once. One moment he was on the ground, hands pressed against the cold stone. The next he was standing somewhere else, a place where the sky boiled and things that should not exist moved in the periphery of his vision. Then he was back. The ruins, the Zha'ari, his team, all frozen for a heartbeat as the universe recalibrated. Kaz recovered first, snapping his rifle upward, searching for something, anything, to fire at. The Zha'ari warriors barely moved, their bodies unnaturally still, save for High Seer Varix, whose eyes burned with something Elias could only describe as terror. You do not know what you have done. The words weren't just a thought in Elias's head this time. They rang in the very air, vibrating with a resonance that did not belong in this reality. The console behind them flared, runes shifting, twisting, reshaping. The alien script had adapted to human and Zha'ari perception alike, displaying something that neither species could ignore. The cycle cannot be broken. The cycle must end. The words burned, searing into Elias's mind. The weight of something vast and unknowable pressed against him. He staggered, gripping his head as images, fragmented, impossible visions flashed through his consciousness. He saw civilizations rise and collapse, not over centuries, but in seconds. He saw war waged across 1,000 galaxies, only for time to rewind, forcing the same battles to play out again and again. He saw the moment the death engine was first activated, long before humanity had reached the stars, and he saw the truth. This was not a weapon. It was something far worse. The death engine did not destroy. It did not obliterate civilizations in fire and fury. It rewrote history, and it was about to do so again. Elias lurched forward, slamming his hand on the console, trying to stop whatever was happening. The runes pulsed beneath his touch, but he was too late. A low droning hum filled the air, the kind that did not belong to any machine but to something alive. The ruins shifted, walls stretching, elongating, distorting into impossible dimensions. Then, the first scream echoed through the chamber. Not human, not Zha'ari. Something else. Something from before. Cass moved to Elias's side, his voice barely a whisper. What the hell is happening? The Zha'ari warriors had drawn their weapons, abandoning their previous stance of silent superiority. They were afraid. Even Varix had taken a step back, his entire being trembling. Then the death engine spoke again. The cycle must be preserved. The errors must be removed. Elias's heart stopped. Errors? It meant them. The ruins collapsed inward, folding space itself as the first anomaly broke free. A figure emerged from the distortion, humanoid in shape, yet wrong in every conceivable way. Its limbs did not move correctly. Its face was both there and not there. It pulsed, shifting between past and present, flickering in and out of reality like a malfunctioning image. Cass opened fire. The rounds passed through it. The thing looked at them. And then time shattered. The moment time shattered, reality ceased to follow any logical order. The ruins of Korthion Prime twisted, stretching into endless corridors that did not exist before. Time loops splintered, repeating fragments of moments before snapping forward again, as if the universe itself was struggling to decide what had already happened and what was yet to come. Elias felt himself split, not in body, but in consciousness. In one moment he stood frozen, staring at the shifting abomination before them. In another he was elsewhere, watching himself make choices he had not yet made. He saw Cass fire another round, saw Varix reach out as if to undo what had been done, saw the Zha'ari warriors flicker between positions as their own timeline unraveled. The anomaly took a step forward, but its movement was wrong, not bound by gravity or inertia, not dictated by the rules of the physical world. It was a shadow of what had once been, caught between existence and erasure, shifting between something ancient and something not yet born. The death engine pulsed again. The cycle must be preserved. The errors must be removed. Elias understood. Now. The death engine was not just a machine. It was a correction mechanism, something designed to reset reality when it strayed too far from its original path. But its creators had underestimated it. The engine was no longer under control. It had evolved, taking the mandate of preservation to its logical extreme. The universe had fractured too many times, too many wars, too many paradoxes, too many changes. And now, the engine had decided there was only one solution: erase everything. Varix turned, his voice a psionic roar. This is why we sealed it away. We did not destroy it because we could not. It exists outside of cause and effect. The walls of the ruins folded inward, warping, dissolving. More anomalies emerged, their forms shifting between species, civilizations. Epochs of time never meant to coexist. Some were recognizable, twisted versions of long-extinct beings that once ruled the stars. Others were monstrous, entities that had never been part of any known reality. And then came the final horror. The death engine itself began to manifest, not as a machine, not as a construct of metal and circuits, but as a presence, a force older than recorded time, shaped by the countless resets it had enacted. It had no single form. It was a tide of shifting potential, an infinite mass of possibility collapsing into itself, erasing and rewriting, consuming and creating. Elias heard it, Inside his skull, a voice made of broken time. You do not belong. None of you do. Cass grabbed him, pulling him backward, breaking his trance. Elias, we have to move. But there was nowhere to go. The past and future were colliding. Every step forward could just as easily lead them backward. Every decision had already been made, except the ones they hadn't chosen yet. And Elias saw it, the one chance, the only chance. The death engine was bound by its purpose, to reset, to rewrite. But it had never been stopped mid-cycle. It had never been overloaded. If they could force it to collapse under its own paradox, it wouldn't just reset history. It would reset itself. But doing so meant one thing. They had to break time completely. Barricks's eyes met his. He understood. Even the Zha'ari, with all their knowledge, had never dared attempt such a thing. It was reckless. It was dangerous. But it was the only way. The console was still active, flickering, waiting. A single command could override the reset process, force the engine to fold in on itself, to self-erase from the very fabric of existence. But it would not be clean. Elias could see the consequences in the fragmented glimpses of 1,000 possible futures. Entire timelines collapsing, civilizations being rewritten, some surviving, some never existing at all. Cass's voice cut through the madness. Tell me you have a plan. Elias didn't answer. There was no plan. Just one choice. His fingers moved. The console flashed red. The death engine screamed. And then, time died. For a fraction of a second, if time could still be measured, the universe ceased to be. All sound, all movement, all thought collapsed into a singularity of nothingness. No past, no future. Only the infinite silence of the void. Then came the reversal. The moment stretched outward, unfurling like a shattered mirror piecing itself back together. But the fragments did not return to their original places. Some slotted back in, forming something recognizable, something familiar. Others were lost, obliterated from existence. Elias felt himself exist again, but something was different. He was displaced, caught between the remnants of what had been and what now was. He stood within the ruins of Korthion Prime, yet they were no longer the same ruins. The black stone monoliths had changed. Some had shifted in structure, others no longer existed at all. The air was wrong, thinner, heavier, like a place that had never been meant to hold the weight of history. Cass was beside him, his breathing ragged, his hands shaking. He turned, his eyes searching. Tell me we're not dead. Elias couldn't answer. He wasn't sure. The death engine was gone. No wreckage, no remains, no trace of the impossible structure that had once slumbered beneath the surface. Even the console, the ancient interface that had held the weight of time itself, had vanished. In its place was nothing, as if it had never been. The Zha'ari warriors were gone too. Barracks, the soldiers, the entire alien presence that had been so determined to prevent this from happening. Erased or perhaps rewritten into a timeline where they had never been here at all. And yet, the galaxy still existed. Cass exhaled, letting his rifle drop to his side. I don't know whether to call this a win or a disaster. Neither did Elias. His mind raced through the implications. They had stopped the death engine. But at what cost? They had forced a paradox, severed the cycle of resets, but they had no way of knowing what had been lost in the process. Memories itched at the edges of his mind, fractured images of things he no longer recognized. The Earth he knew, the wars he remembered. Had they happened? Had they changed? Had he changed? His hands clenched. He had no way of knowing. Cass turned in a slow circle, scanning the ruins. Do we call for evac? His voice was hoarse, raw with the weight of what they had just survived. Elias's throat tightened. I don't know if there's anyone left to call. Silence hung between them, heavy with the enormity of what had transpired. Then, a sound, faint, distant, a whisper on the wind. Elias turned, his breath catching in his chest, a single pulse barely perceptible, thrummed beneath the surface. A vibration that should not be there, a presence that should have been erased. The death engine was gone, but something had replaced it, and the cycle had only just begun. The silence of Korthion Prime was deceptive. Where once the ruins had been a tomb of ancient history, now they stood as a monument to something new, something rewritten. Elias stood at the edge of the excavation site, staring into the abyss that should not have existed. The death engine was gone, its presence erased from time itself, but the void it left behind had not remained empty. The ground beneath his feet pulsed, faint but unmistakable, a heartbeat in the fabric of reality. Kaz shifted beside him, his expression tight. "I don't like this." His voice was quiet, as if speaking too loudly might awaken something they hadn't meant to disturb. Neither did Elias, because something had survived. The timeline should have collapsed completely, resetting the death engine and its influence over history. But reality was imperfect. Time did not heal cleanly. He could feel it, the shape of something vast just beyond comprehension. A presence rewriting itself into existence, shifting between possibilities, stabilizing into something new. And worst of all, it was watching them. Breeze swept through the ruins, carrying the scent of dust and something else. Something metallic, something ancient. Elias's fingers twitched. His mind was filled with the fractured remains of timelines he was never meant to remember. Wars that never happened, empires that never rose, people that were never born. Yet, deep beneath the surface, something was remembering. Kaz exhaled sharply. "We should leave. Whatever we did, we can't fix it now." Elias hesitated. His instinct screamed at him to stay, to dig deeper, to uncover what had taken the death engine's place. But he knew better now. Some things were never meant to be touched. Still, as they turned to leave, the ground pulsed again, this time stronger. Elias stopped, his breath hitching, because this time he heard it. A voice, a whisper, a single phrase carried on the wind. The cycle must begin. His blood ran cold. The death engine was gone. But something far worse had taken its place.